Hi, this is Nathan. I'm doing my final presentation for Suck It Up Milkshake Company, and basically it was a analysis for sales forecasting and social media sentiment. Um, this was a data-driven approach for the business. The course was for applied analytics. Obviously, my sponsor was Dr. Kalita. Quick highlights, executive summary. So primarily, the business faced staffing demand uncertainty after expanding into a storefront. So they operated as a truck model for about 2 years prior to opening a brick and mortar. They were successful in operating the truck, which had really no or little overhead. They were profitable, very profitable, and did well attending local events and promoting their business this way. Once they opened the shop, basically they had issues with predicting sales, or demand, which led to staffing issues, whether overstaffing or understaffing, primarily overstaffing, due to the fact that the milkshakes are quite exquisite or um, very detailed, so very unique. So they want to find a way to hopefully minimize labor staffing in order to increase profitability, reduce costs. So my idea was to try to build some forecasting models to help them with this demand uncertainty. Also, I wanted to run some sentiment analysis just to give them an insight into their marketing, what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, where they can move forward with this. This further moved into comparative analysis with another local business that was well known or well renowned for their ice cream. So the analysis included sales trends, weather impacts, and customer reviews. Hopefully, the final models provide actionable guidance for them for their operations and marketing. I believe they do. At least they're a solid foundation. So the data sources that I utilized was primarily Square that gave all the sales for the past 2 years. I was able to use that for the past 2 years since they opened in April of 2023. The brick and mortar shop, that is. Um, they they have recorded data on any application-based payment methods as well as any credit debit transactions. The only thing this doesn't account for is cash transactions. The cash transactions they don't record except for manually, but fortunately I spoke with them and they say that approximately 90% of customers pay with either card or some type of application-based payment. So I'm roughly missing 10% of sales forecast, but I was able to utilize this and get some idea of their sales. I also used the NOAA weather data, which is National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. I utilized minimum temperature and precipitation. I downloaded a data set that had much more than this, but the only two that seemed significant or showed significance was minimum temperature and precipitation on the sales. I also used Google and Yelp reviews, which I had to manually scrape for sentiment analysis. Google was used for the Suck It Up Milkshake Company. I used any reviews they had, which was 50 something. And then I used Yelp, which was for another local business called Brushy Mountain Smokehouse and Creamery. I also had to scrape that manually. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to utilize code that was pulling directly from the API. Google had a limit of 5 reviews pulled and they're random. Yelp had a blocker. So I would have had to pay hundreds of dollars per month just to get access to the rest of these reviews. It seemed easier just to scrape them manually. Further, I combined internal and external data to build forecasting insights. So for the data preparation and cleansing, I aggregated daily milkshake and net total sales. I applied a 7-day rolling average and ArcSine H transformations, engineered lag features, and one hot encoded calendar variables, and a merged weather data, and removed missing values. So rolling averages smooths the data. Arcsine H stabilizes extreme values for better modeling. Basically told the model explicitly what day it is and what month it is without treating the days or months as ordered numbers. This helps capture seasonality or weekly patterns. This is a commonly used principle or model method in time series forecasting. So I utilize this to help clean my data and prepare my data for modeling. All right, so to discuss my modeling approaches for the forecast modeling, I used basic linear regression, weather enhanced linear regression modeling, and then I attempted both ARIMA and ARIMA X models, and I evaluated the models using your basic accuracy metrics, including interval coverage, prediction interval coverage. I did this for both milkshake and net cells. So once again, to reiterate, milkshakes are primarily the cause for high labor due to the fact that they are very intricate, very unique, require a lot of hands-on customization. I also did it for net cells, as the business sells more than just milkshakes. They sell multiple other items. So I did all of these models for both. I also incorporated, once again, Tmin is temperature minimum temperature, and PRCP is precipitation. These were the only two values of the weather data that showed significant impact on the cells data for both net cells and milkshake cells. I grouped the net cells and the milkshake cells obviously by day. And yeah, these are some of the methods that I used for modeling. And for the forecast accuracy results, so I had two models that were the best. So one was for the milkshake model and one was for the net cells. So the milkshake model is dealing with only milkshakes. The best model I came up with was a 7-lagged model, which achieved an R squared of 91%, which is a strong fit. So that's 91% of the independent variables explaining the dependent variable, excuse me. For the net cells model with weather, including minimum temperature as well as precipitation, the R squared was 61.1%, not as strong, but not bad. So once again, the milkshake is only milkshakes. The net cells is the entirety of everything they sold from the shop. The milkshake model forecasted within plus or minus $9 for 52% of test days, meaning 52% of my predictions against what actually happened was within plus or minus $9. The reason I went with $9 in this is because milkshake is roughly $9. The average milkshake is. If you go with a kid's milkshake, it's a little bit cheaper, but if you go with typical milkshake, it's $9. I also ran this analysis at the $20 interval, which gave me an 83% prediction rate. So saying that 83% of my predictions were within plus or minus $20, which was pretty cool. But once again, I'm trying to stick to one milkshake, because if I can say, hey, you're going to make one milkshake or one more or one milkshake less, it helps with staffing. The net sales model forecasted within plus or minus $20 for 73% of the days. So I thought this was pretty decent, even though the R squared isn't great, simply because they've had peak days up. Their highest day in the past 2 years was a little bit over $1,600. Their lowest days in the hundreds. So you're talking, $20 over $800. It's pretty decent. So I thought this was interesting. These were both my best forecast models. In the milkshake model, further, the coverage of the prediction interval was around 74%, and I used a 90% confidence level, which suggests intervals were narrower, and missed some actual values, but could be improved. In contrast, the net sales model with weather included had 98.5% coverage of the prediction interval at the 95% confidence level, which is great, but it came with trade-off. The intervals were much wider, around $40 on average. which reduces precision. So, good coverage, but too wide a range sometimes makes it less actionable. But overall, pretty decent models, at least for foundational models. Something to build upon. So once again, for sentiment and competitive analysis, I use Google and Yelp reviews. I use Vader sentiment scoring. I also built bigram, trigram, and n-gram models. When I say n-gram, I just did a four word model, trying to identify customer themes. I compared Suck It Up Company to Brushy Mountain Smokehouse and Creamery. Both reviews, Brushy Mountain from Yelp and Suck It Up from Google. Suck It Up showed strong positivity, but also had less reviews as they've been around less time than the competitor. They've been around for 2 years. Brushy Mountain's been around for at least 15, 20. I wasn't exactly sure how long. I know that I grew up going there, so I figured they were a good competitor to analyze against. All right, so this is my first graph showing my first linear model. This is for net cells, including my precipitation and minimum temperature. As you can see, the red is the actual, the blue is my predictions. I cut the data here at 90%. I also have the prediction interval coverage here, and my forecast accuracy metrics are also included. So the ME is mean error, excuse me. So a lower mean error if it's negative, smaller negative mean error typically means under forecasting just slightly. And then you have the RMSE, which is root mean squared error. And so this says that lower values indicate that the model's forecasts are closely aligned with the actual values, and penalizes larger errors. So it's a little bit high, but it's not terrible. Once again, not a bad model. And then we have the mean absolute error, which represents the average magnitude of prediction errors regardless of direction. Together, all of these metrics demonstrate the model has a reasonably good fit. It's consistent, the performance and minimal bias in its predictions. So once again, a decent fit, not terrible, not great, but a good foundational model. So this graph is my milkshake graph. So this is using lagged features. I use the lagged 7-day feature smoothing milkshake cells. As you can see, once again, the red is the actual, and you can see the variability compared to net cells. It's quite significant. But anyway, so once again, I cut it 90% on the data. I have the prediction intervals. I also have my predicted values as well as the actual in red. It still follows pretty closely, but not as close as net cells. So I use a linear regression approach, once again using lagged cells features. It helps me to capture temporal trends and seasonality and milkshake demand. Once again, the ME mean error shows the model has no bias, and it's very, very small, meaning that it actually overpredicts just a hair here versus the previous model underpredicted with a small negative score. You have the root mean squared error, which is actually a lot tighter than the net cells, which would obviously also make up the explanation for the R squared value in the linear regression for both of these. Slightly higher out of sample than in sample. That means basically forecast errors increase somewhat on unseen data, but they're still controlled, somewhat controlled. And then we have the MAE, which is the mean absolute error, and it reflects consistent prediction accuracy. Has low error magnitudes both in sample and out of sample models. Overall, the model captures the seasonality and trend of the milkshake cells. So it gives us good insight into the forecast for the future. In here, I have a basic bar graph for the sentiment comparison between the two businesses, Suck It Up and Brushy Mountain Smokehouse and Creamery. So you obviously have the reviews, the counter reviews, in positive, negative, and neutral sentiment. So once again, Brushy Mountain's been around longer. It has more reviews than Suck It Up. I think it was 70, almost 80 reviews, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember off the top of my head. Suck It Up had 53 on Google, but some of those reviews had no actual text. It was just 5-star, 1-star, 12-star ratings, whatever it was. So I was only able to scrape a portion of that. As you can see, it has a good positive review. Very, very few negatives, and unfortunately, it just doesn't have enough reviews to stack up against Brushy Mountain, but that doesn't mean that they are losing to Brushy Mountain. So once again, both businesses had mostly positive sentiment. Suck It Up stood out for mentions of presentation and unique flavors. Once again, I told you that the milkshakes themselves are very intricate, very unique, very well cared for, I guess I could say. So Brushy had slightly more reviews, but they also have been around a lot longer and offer more than just ice cream and milkshakes. They offer barbecue and other things. So once again, they're it's not a direct comparison, but it's close considering they're known well for their ice cream, but they're also known for other things. The competitor was often cited for slow service and wait times, and the bigram and trigram models that I developed were showing why customers felt that way and not just how. That's part of where I got slow service and wait times for. So recommendations going forward, obviously utilize the forecasted sales to better align staffing schedules. Focus social media marketing during historically slower periods to try to boost customer traffic and hopefully, grow sales during those slow times. Continue to monitor and analyze customer reviews for evolving trends, and then improve transaction tracking by encouraging card/app payments, or primarily what will be best is to find a way to record cash transactions more accurately. I also recommend that there's other opportunities to look at it if there's another way to track foot traffic for customers in and out of the store. How many customers are we getting in that don't actually purchase anything? Types of things like that could be beneficial. I think that might be better as they grow bigger. I don't know that that would be necessarily something they should look at right now as a smaller business. Just to reiterate a couple limitations that I had during this project and things going forward that we can try to work on. Square Data excludes 10% of cash only sales. We have limited historical data from the food truck phase. So once again, we had great sales, great profitability during the food truck phase. Once the shop opened, and they still operate the food truck, and some of those sales still come from the food truck. So that's another problem in itself because I'm not able to discern the difference between food truck sales and brick and mortar sales or the shop sales. So that's something that we can look into. Manually scraping was required for some of the reviews data. So once again, the Google API, I was able to get access at the manager level from the business, but unfortunately, I was not able to scrape them with a programming language or a specific line of code, as they have to upgrade and pay more to be able to do this. So that was kind of painful. So if we start seeing hundreds or thousands of reviews, we're gonna have to upgrade and look at a better way to pull in data from that. Also, looking at weather effects on daily sales, they were present, but they were moderate, so we didn't really see a whole lot of effect. We saw some that was explanatory, but not a ton. So that didn't help a ton. There was a lot of variables that was included in the NOAA weather data set that just was not significant. So makes you question. Also, it's time series, so makes sense that some of that wouldn't be a explanatory variable, such as snow. They have limited hour operations during the winter, so obviously if they're closed during the winter during certain hours and it snows, that's not going to be an explanatory variable. So some of those things we have to look at, but overall, I did have two explanatory variables from the weather data set. So building upon that is always good. So going forward, I hope to build a larger database of reviews over time for better sentiment trends. Some of the things I've thought about is handling extreme outliers in sales data by replacing them with mean or median values to reduce the noise, basically reducing um, the outliers, reducing the jump in the data, either jump or trough. Consider segmenting the data set at the structural breakpoint to model pre and post decline trends separately for improved accuracy. Explore ensemble methods to combine forecasting models, so looking at the best forecast models that I have, and then potentially use an ensemble method to create a better model. And then finally, investigate point of sale system upgrades to better track all transactions, including cash. To add on to this just a little bit, I think that potentially if I could create a system, and this is something that will be in my, further in the future, that, with knowledge and experience, I could hopefully build them a model that records the transactions, records all this data that I'm talking about, and I already have a model in place, so it feeds that information into the model, and the model updates on its own, so that they're able to constantly, daily, monthly, weekly look at this stuff and adjust accordingly. Once again, this will be something further in the future, but hopefully employing something that, whether it be a dashboard or just a simple program that runs all this and outputs it, so they can look in and better adjust their scheduling, staffing, inventory, etc., into their daily models, so that they are more profitable and more successful overall. That's some things that I've considered. Once again, that'll be far into the future. So, anyways, I believe that is it for my final presentation for Suck It Up. If you have any questions, just please give me any feedback, any questions you have, and comment below. Thank you.